This video will prepare you for the Unit 5 cell ISN check. Please make sure on page 5 your table of contents is completely filled in. Remember, anytime you may hit the pause button to fill in anything you may be missing. And again, all these handouts are located in the absent file, or they're located on the daily agendas as clickable links. On page 5 is the table of contents, and on page 6 is the cell structure vocabulary. On page 7 is our characteristics of life notes, where we did the Is Sammy Alive activity, and on the back we looked at the 7 different characteristics of living things. On page 8 we have the Is It Alive investigation, and on page 9 the structure and function warm-up. Underneath the structure and function warm-up is a warm-up from February 16th. Across from that on page 10 is your You've Got the Job city planning diagram, where you later filled in the organelles. On page 11 is the Cell City song, and on 12 is the cell organelle and their function notes with the nicknames. On page 13 is the Bill Nye cells, and underneath that is a warm-up from February 22nd. On page 14 we glued down our cell organelle diagram with the dominoes. And on page 15, we have the group's cell models, where you describe what object you brought in and what it represented in the cell model. And page 16 were the cell model directions. On page 17 is comparing plant and animal cell Venn diagram. And on page 18 is where you labeled the different structures and functions of the organelles. On page 19 is a warm-up we taped in from the 29th of February. And on page 20 was the osmosis and diffusion notes. If you're missing these, check out the daily agenda for these, copy the notes. On page 21 was a warm-up on osmosis and diffusion. Remember, we drew pictures of the difference and talked about how osmosis is related to diffusion. On page 22 is the Great Gummy Bear experiment, where we did osmosis and then graphed it and completed the conclusion questions. On page 23 are the parts of the microscope, and a warm-up from March 3rd. And on page 24 was our how to use and make good drawing tips for drawing microscopes. 25 is the page we practiced and wrote our challenge for Einstein Jr. in the form of a question. And on page 26 is the using the light microscope, where we went around and did 3 different drawings based on the different microscope slides that we saw. On page 27 is the interest link, where we talked about the cells that are quite large. And on page 28 is the cell size lab we completed in class with the potatoes. On page 29 is a warm-up from March 8th. 30 is our comparing and contrasting photosynthesis with cellular respiration. And on page 31 is the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And again, we will have completed this in class. And lastly, on page 32 is your cell structure study guide. So if you're missing anything, check out those clickable links or come check out the absent file for anything you might miss.